in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I am the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am very excited to welcome our next guest on the interview series, Angeles Valenciano. She is the CEO of the National and Global Diversity Council. Angeles, thank you so much for being here. If you want to share a little bit about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns and when you were younger, do you remember how exactly you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Thank you so much for the invitation, Christina, and I'm so happy to be here and to share just a little bit of my story and my insights and my time as leader of the National Diversity Council and the Global Diversity Council. You know, I'm an immigrant to this country, and many know the story. I come from a beautiful city called San Luis Potosí in Mexico. Soy mexicana. And arriving in the US right after college, I knew that I wanted to help people. I knew that my calling was to serve in some capacity as a leader. And I really understood that at the time, diversity was not a big conversation in the US, in the States. These are the 90s. I didn't speak English very well, almost at all. And so some of those barriers really stuck with me when thinking about growing into a career and a profession that really spoke to me and to my heart of the things that I wanted to do going forward. So I think as a young person, I always knew that I wanted to serve in some capacity. I'm a big ally of the LGBTQ community. I have been for many, many years. My pronouns are she, her, ella.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing your journey to this work. I always think it's interesting to think about what we thought or where we would be when we were younger. And I'm sure you have a lot of different projects going on at the National Global Diversity Council. What's the current problem you're trying to solve? Like, I'm sure you're helping people every day as well.
Not really a problem. I see those as opportunities to grow and to move in directions where we are needed. The National Diversity Council continues to expand its footprint as the voice for diversity, equity, and inclusion in the country, but also abroad. So as we work to continue to incorporate programming, events, educational opportunities, our certification programs, our consulting and training, all of this is so important to do in a scale that now involves organizations worldwide. So we are not just focusing on, domestic interventions and ideas, but also how do we carry this into the world stage with the different countries that continue to participate with us and continue to see the value of DEI, not just for US-based organizations, but globally.
Absolutely. Having that global perspective is so important, especially when we have these conversations, really defining what diversity, equity, and inclusion means based on location, based on the team you're in as well. I know you've been the Chief Executive Officer for, I think it's over 6 years now, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of change and growth over time as well. You shared kind of the shift towards this work in the 90s as well. We've seen a lot of organizations over these past years really invest in their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Have you seen the organization change over time internally and or externally?
That's a wonderful question. You know, I've been thinking about this, and I shared with our National Board of Directors also that as an organization, really, we have faced so many different challenges, especially during the last 2 years of this pandemic. We have seen unprecedented government actions. We have seen a strong recovery after a very sharp and deep global recession. We see a country that is highly polarized. We have seen elections that have gone in different directions. And we have also seen a war against, Ukraine, which is, these are all elements and things that I feel really hurt organizations in so many different ways. It's extreme suffering of populations, of people. It's the restructuring, to my knowledge, of a global order. And all of this, I come to the understanding of it in the sense that we are not isolated in our country, that all of these disruptions, that all of these factors really hurt the work that we are doing in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplaces. It hurts our employees. It hurts the business community. And so, in a time where things are so divided and people are so polarized, we have to come to an understanding that things only work when we work together.
Absolutely. Understanding that these things don't happen in a silo or a box. We can't separate ourselves what's happening externally in the world internally too. And I think a lot of employers, especially in corporate America, are recognizing that as well. What are some of the most impactful strategic partnerships you've seen or had really with employers, and why were they so impactful or meaningful from that lens?
You know, we're celebrating Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. We're also celebrating our Arab American Heritage Month. And one of the most valuable experiences that I see in being able to highlight our different communities and the strength and beauty of honoring cultures, religions, and everything, every dimension that you can think of that speaks to diversity, is something that we as an organization have been so fortunate to bring to our partner organizations. We work with over 800 national and global organizations. And when they reach out and say, Angeles, we want this programming to be mirrored in Ciudad de Mexico, or we want to see it in Dubai, or we want to see it, in other parts of the world, because they know that when they have quality programming, where they have quality education and services from a provider, from a partner such as us, the credibility is there, the impact is there, and it's time for action. Organizations need to understand that it's no longer about discussing or a nice statement, out on their website. We need to see actions. We need to see what CEOs and leaders of organizations are truly doing to reflect the changing times, demographics, and innovations that DEI bring to all organizations.
Yeah, we need to see those actions. And also, I would say it's an expectation now also for leaders, for CEOs, for organizations to really support the fullness of employees' lives as well, and understand what's happening, keep a pulse on everything that is going on as well. And when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion from a global perspective, making sure we're not looking at it from a Western lens as well. What have you seen be the most successful in organizations really intentionally not perpetuating that trauma that happens externally in the world, internally at their company or organization?
I have seen a lot of work being done around mental health, and I have seen organizations that have really taken the time to remove the stigma of what mental health has been in the past, and embracing the fact that, as I said when we started our segment, that there is hurt, that there is trauma, that all of us have been one way or the other impacted by a pandemic, all of the things that we see, racial hatred, we see social unrest, all of these things have really brought leaders in organizations, inclusive leaders, I should say, in organizations, to the understanding that when they open up their minds and their heart and see what their employees are experiencing outside, those employees can be their customers, can be their consumers, it could be, all of it tied into one. But when they see that, organizations that are truly effective in establishing guidelines and models and resources to assist, those are the ones that we just have to really commend for their impactful performance, for what they do to help understand that as things evolved in the world, they will not get easier, they will get a little harder. And that we have to open our minds to the understanding that it's only when leaders create organizations of desire to learn, to accept, to acknowledge, to be humble and compassionate, that is when the real work begins for the transformation that we want to see in our workplaces.
Yeah, and to have that work happen, a lot of hard conversations need to take place, a lot of vulnerability and leading with empathy as well. Not everybody has the answers, but really leaning into engaging meaningfully in this conversation is important. And we've seen a lot of leaders do that recently as well. Is there anything that you wish more people were talking about when we are talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? Anything missing from the conversation, or just wish you were highlighting more?
Yeah, it's interesting that during the course of this last year, I have seen the conversation shift in different directions. And one of the things that I'm concerned about is seeing how there has been this shift to remove the word equity from the conversation of diversity and inclusion. I think it's so important that we remain committed to the fact that unless we create equitable spaces, we can't really function wholly. We can't bring a whole person into the mix. And so the thing that I hope we continue to champion is the equity that we so speak about. I'm seeing terms like belonging, and they're so broad, and to me, the work has to be measured. The work has to be accounted for. The work has to be intentional. We can't disguise that with fancy titles or nice words or feel-good words. No, equity is important. And at the end of the day, that is probably the most important element in this formula of DEI.
I think that the words that we use definitely matter, the common language that we have, and equity is a key piece of the conversation for sure. And equity is not the same as equality. Equity is important to really define as well. I think that during a lot of these conversations, a lot of our kind of webinars with practitioners in diversity, equity, and inclusion in the people space at employers, everyone always brings up the question of how do I know if I'm doing a good job? How am I measuring the success of these initiatives? And measuring something like equity and belonging and inclusion is really hard. And we don't want to say, okay, like we had checked this box, so we're not going to work on this anymore. But we know that what gets measured gets really invested in. What is your philosophy around measuring diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives and strategies really effectively?
Absolutely. You're right on target with that. And I'm a firm believer that what gets measured gets done and accounted for. And so one of our biggest push this year has been to work very closely with our Diversity First Index. And the index is a measurement tool that we created to score organizations on their commitment and action around DEI. So hoping you saw the announcement. We sent it out a couple of days ago. It's all over social media, where we rank organizations on several aspects of their DEI effort. One of them being CEO engagement. And I feel that it has to start at the top, because it is when we see the commitment of a CEO truly committed to inclusive leadership, to incorporating transformation into their organization, that things happen. It's not a revolution. It's an evolution of organizations growing from being, where they are to become best in class, to really seize the moment of that transformation, and it begins there.
Yeah, I definitely believe in inclusive leadership, setting the standard from the top. And I think as senior leaders and executives, taking on that unique role to really take a stand and support your employees, support your stakeholders and your team, and really effectively communicate that as well. And having that framework is important to see if this is something we need to work on. This is something that is present and needs to continue to be present. We know that this cultural transformation work, this change management, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a marathon and not a sprint, if you will, to use that analogy. I'm sure you have many of these as well, but what is one of your proudest moments in really doing this work?
Yes, there's quite a few. It's been quite a journey. We will be celebrating 20 years of the inception of the National Diversity Council in 2024. So we're planning something big. So there are many proud moments. I think one of the proudest moments that I have had came from a moment of sadness and of loss. We lost a dear friend, a mentor, and a leader that when we first launched the Texas, at that time, it was the Texas Diversity Council. Nobody knew who we are. We're launching this nonprofit. It is the beginning of 2004. But this leader, General Colin Powell, was one of our biggest supporters throughout the time that we launched the council. As you may know, we lost General Powell last year. But one of my proudest moments in that, I was looking through social media, and it was our LinkedIn page, and I saw where just all of these messages around his passing and some of his thoughts as an inclusive leader, as well as quotes were being shared. And then I saw one, and then I saw two, and then I saw hundreds of these, pop up on LinkedIn. But every single one of them said, thanks to the National Diversity Council, we were able to see him in person. Thanks to the council, we were able to be at a conference in Pennsylvania, in Texas, in California, in Illinois. That's probably one of my proudest moments, that, he always spoke about a mission, being in the Army, but at the end, he always spoke about purpose and impact. And that is what the National Diversity Council is. We really work with a purpose, and we work with a purpose to create impact, such as that. So I have to say that's one of my proudest moments.
Bringing people together to see an incredible speaker, an incredible inclusive leader, and really having an impact on people's lives and how they experience, inclusion, and having those conversations.
How it changed them, and they will always remember it and think about it and have it, as a great memory. Yes.
Yeah, bringing people together through experiences and connection and storytelling. Is there something you are currently working on that you are most excited by? Of course, without giving too much away, but wanted to also ask that question of in the works.
Yes, we are. As I mentioned, we are celebrating a very big milestone of our very first Women in Leadership Symposium being held in 2004. So 2024 this is our flagship event. We have celebrated this gathering of women leaders for almost 20 years in over 100 cities around the country and in different cities around the world. As a matter of fact, I will be headed to Dubai with my team at the end of the year to celebrate our second one there. But we are planning a huge gathering of women leaders that have participated in the span of the 20 years to come back to where it all began in Texas, the very first one. And this is going to be tremendous because we are looking at bringing between 3,000 to 4,000 women from all over the country, every industry, that have participated as panelists to our event, to join us in really speaking to how have we changed in 2 decades? Has the progress around women in the workplace changed? And what are we seeing now? How much work do we have to continue to do to find that parity in the gaps that still exist for women in the workplace? So I can't give out any more details than that, but it will be a fantastic gathering with a very special keynote who we are securing as we speak.
That's really exciting. Also speaking to the point of the progress that has been made and also the work that needs to be done as well. So showing that balance too. I know you mentioned that you are celebrating Asian American Pacific Islander Month and Arab Heritage Month as well. June 2022, we are here again. How is the National Diversity Council honoring and celebrating Pride this year? Understanding that I'm sure this is something you're doing in supporting LGBTQ employees and kind of community members 365 days a year.
Yes, we actually have several LGBTQ summits that we are hosting in different states and different cities across the country. I'm most excited for the one that we are hosting June 16th in Mexico City because it takes me back to my home country. So we are celebrating Cumbre de la Unidad in Ciudad de Mexico. And we are so happy because we will have such a wonderful gathering of LGBTQ leaders there. And it's a hybrid event. So we are broadcasting live to our global and national partners, which is going to be fantastic.
That is very exciting. Another great event and kind of program to bring people together as well. Annalise, is there anything that I didn't ask you throughout our conversation that you want to share with folks who are listening, or maybe underscoring 1 to 2 key takeaways you hope people bring with them?
No, I think you asked all the questions that perfectly. And I just want to thank you for your voice and for adding your perspective to a conversation that is so important. We have work to do in bringing together our AAPI community. And we have work to do as champions for diversity to be able to do that and to create spaces and to create important moments to where we can lift our community up. We have seen a lot of things that have sadly impacted our API. Can I say our, because I am part of that as well, through my heart, not through my background. But it is important that as we see things continue, that we support, that we elevate, that we amplify each other. And so thank you for having me so much. I really appreciate the time with you today. And thank you for the amazing work that you are doing and that you will continue to do.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. This is definitely one of my favorite parts of the job and speaking to leaders as yourself. So thank you for the work you're doing and for being on Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon.
My pleasure.
And as a reminder for folks who are listening, at AllVoices, we really believe in employees and employers being seen, heard, and understood, and know it's a requirement for the organization to really succeed overall. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.